Welcome back to this week's episode of Hormones, Metabolism, and You. I'm your host, Dr. Cassie Smith. I am a board-certified endocrinologist who is now a functional medicine doctor, and I'm based out of Oklahoma City. The point of this podcast is to help give you good medical information that is more holistic or functional medicine based. I have had a lot of people reach out to me about sleep issues. Sleep disorders affect 1 out of 3 Americans. So it's estimated that 50 to 70 million Americans struggle with sleep issues every single day. Now, why is that an issue? Let me tell you that mental health and sleep issues are highly correlated. I have a sleep expert today, Dr. Audrey Wells, who is going to talk to us about sleep medicine, but also about hormones. She said that there is not a single mental health disorder that sleep is not affected by. Now, anxiety and depression are the most common mental health disorders in this country. 18% of Americans struggle with anxiety and 21% struggle with depression. So that's about 1 in 5 people who have mental health disorders that a lot of times are worsened by sleep issues. And so sleep is very important. I brought her on because I wanted to ask her all the questions about sleep, and I wanted to tie it to your hormones as well. So I asked her, what happens when we sleep? Like, why is sleep so important? How long do we really need to sleep? How much sleep do we need? You hear all sorts of different things. 6 hours is fine. You need 8 hours. You need 9 hours. So she talks to us about how much sleep we actually need, and it's somewhat dependent on our sex. Men and women need different amounts of sleep. We talked about how do you know if you have sleep issues? Like, we're sleeping. So how do you know if you actually have issues? She talks to us about like what types of symptoms you could have during the day that could let you know you maybe have sleep issues. So if you don't have a sleep partner, if you do have a sleep partner, some of the things they could tell you that would make you think you have sleep issues. She talks about different types of testing that we could do. We talked a lot about sleep trackers. So like the Oura rings, things like that. Should we wear them? Are they actually helpful? Are they factual? Are they accurate? So we talked about that. She talked about how women actually have very non-specific sleep symptoms. So shocker, women, we have a lot of non-specific heart symptoms, cardiac symptoms. So 2 out of 3 women will die of heart disease, and 1/3 of those women have no symptoms prior to dying. So we have very non-specific symptoms in a lot of areas, but sleep is no different. So we talked about that, and we talked about how women need more sleep than men and why. We talked about how testosterone can be related to that. And so there was a good discussion about hormones. We talked about the different types of sleep again, and we talked about HRV, which is this new buzz trending topic. What is HRV? Why is it important? How does our sleep affect it? So I thought that was a very powerful conversation. Then I asked her all the things you guys want to know. How does caffeine affect your sleep? How does stress affect your sleep? How does alcohol affect our sleep? So that's a big one. Sleep hygiene tips. I said to her, what can we do to fix our sleep hygiene? What do we do if we can't fall asleep? What do we do if our mind races when we lay down? What do we do if we wake up at 3 a.m. and our mind's racing? Like, what can we do to kind of shut off that default brain is what she calls it. So we talked about that. She gave us some very good information about health hazards if you sleep less than 6 hours. So that was something I thought was very powerful. And then at the very end, we had a conversation about how sleep actually affects your hunger hormones. Not only your physiologic hormone of hunger, like that I am literally hungry. That is one of the things that people use GLP-1 receptor agonists for now. But sleep actually also affects something called your emotional hunger. And so that emotional hunger, when we eat from emotional, like when we're just emotionally eating, GLP-1s don't fix that. So that's part of the reason why they don't work on everyone. But sleep is actually tied to not only physiologic, but emotional hunger. So that was a very interesting conversation that we had towards the end. So we are going to talk about this. So I hope that you find this very informative. I hope that you learn lots of things about sleep. So here we go. Dr. Audrey Wells is a triple board certified physician with over 15 years of experience in sleep medicine, obesity medicine, and pediatrics. She's a leading expert in sleep health, specializing in diagnosing and treating sleep disorders like sleep apnea and insomnia. Her approach goes beyond traditional treatment, integrative cutting-edge technology, non-pharmaceutical therapies like CBTI, and lifestyle innovations to help patients achieve optimal sleep. Dr. Wells has led has held leadership roles in clinical and digital health initiatives, where she's been instrumental in developing innovative sleep health solutions. She's a recognized thought leader and accomplished speaker, known for her engaging presentations to audiences ranging from medical professionals to business leaders and consumers. She also has a passion for empowering others through education, having built comprehensive sleep health platforms and virtual programs that have helped thousands of individuals improve their sleep. Beyond her clinical experience or expertise, Dr. Wells is an advocate for women's health and a champion of holistic approaches to patient care. Her entrepreneurial mindset and collaborative spirit have driven her to push the boundaries of what's possible in the sleep health industry. She believes in leveraging creativity, technology, and data to transform the patient journey and deliver high-impact, sustainable solutions. So thank you for joining us on this episode.
Pleasure to be here. I love talking about sleep, and so getting the opportunity to spread the word is something that makes me really happy.
Well, I think that sleep is so important. And, I talk a lot about this on my podcast and just in general. When people come to functional medicine doctors like myself, I'm pretty clear with them that if you're not doing what I call the basics, which are eating whole nutritious food, moving your body, getting sunlight, managing your stress, and sleeping well, then you're probably wasting your time, my time, and your money, because everything that we're going to do is not going to work very well in the environment that you are creating. And so sleep is one of those really important things. And I just think it's not, they don't teach us about it in med school, really, right? Like we know you need to do it, but that's all they tell you. And there's not a lot of good resources for people about sleep in general, right? It's like, okay, we'll get off your phone, but there's no real good explanation as to why people have issues sleeping, why it happens at different times, different things to do. So I'm really happy that you agreed to come and chat with our audience. And in general, I want to kind of focus on anxiety, depression, brain fog type symptoms, just like I can't get anything done. Mm-hmm. It's my understanding that a lot of these symptoms sometimes, not only can sleep affect them, it's kind of like this revolving door, right? Like if you have these symptoms, it could be from lack of sleep. And if you're not sleeping well, it can cause these symptoms. So it's like what caused what, right?
Yeah, and I see this all the time for people who come to consult with me. They have a host of nonspecific symptoms, and they're concerned about other diagnoses like ADHD, depression, anxiety, because there's so much overlap with how those disorders express and sleep deprivation or an undiagnosed, untreated sleep disorder. So part of my role is to sort of take a comprehensive look at a person's situation, their medical history, and even their mental health to figure out exactly what's attributable to sleep problems versus other things.
I like that. So my first question for you is in what ways do sleep, anxiety, depression, ADHD, how do they all interact? Can you give us I guess, big overview of that?
Yeah, there's no mental health disorder in which sleep is unaffected. So every psychiatric diagnosis out there has sleep disruption as one of the features, and it's a matter of frequency and degree. But it becomes sort of a feed-forward mechanism, or some would call it a downward spiral, because if you're not sleeping well, your brain doesn't work well. And if your brain doesn't work well, you don't sleep well. And so that feed-forward loop can really work somebody into a tough spot where they're using medications, they're using substances, they're using maladaptive coping mechanisms to try to pull themselves out of the situation. And one way to think about it is sleep is an enhancer. So if you're getting good sleep, you feel good. And that's one of the natural pleasures available to us in life, that feeling of being well rested and feeling like you were able to get that delicious, deep sleep that we all deserve. So that enhances our life, that makes us happier, more present with family, emotionally regulated, and better decision makers. On the other hand, if you're not getting good sleep, then that enhances things in a negative way. So it makes the world look darker. Our negativity bias is more profound. And it really sort of puts the lid on creativity and problem solving that all of us need just to make it through the world as human beings. So it can make situations of anxiety or depression worse, because if you feel like you've lost the ability to make good choices or troubleshoot things going on in your life, it really accentuates the depression or the anxiety that you're dealing with. So sleep and an emphasis on doing good behaviors to get healthy sleep is a health step that is foundational. And to your point, it's something that you need to address if you're dealing with mental health issues.
I would completely agree. So, how do you know if anxiety, depression, ADHD are related to or made worse by like this sleep problem? How would you know that?
Um, I advise people to take a look at their nighttime symptoms and their daytime symptoms. So, um, sometimes just having things reported to you can be insightful. So, snoring, restlessness during sleep, some sleep behaviors can occur that are kind of red flags for a person's sleep quality. If you're not getting enough sleep, that can contribute to mental health disorders. And if you wake up with different symptoms, like wake up with sore legs or restless legs, wake up with gasping for breath, these are indicators that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. And it's interesting because even though all of us sleep, all of us experience sleep, because it's a state of unconsciousness, it's a blind spot in our lives. So sometimes sleep testing is necessary to take a deeper look. On the flip side of things, you have daytime symptoms. So, how alert do you feel? You should look for your peak alertness to be in the late morning, usually around 10 to 11 o'clock in the morning. How well are you able to concentrate during the day? What's your memory like? How is your mood regulation? So, if those things are suffering, and especially if you have sleep symptoms that go along with it, then it makes sense to maybe have a consult with someone like me who can work out what needs to be the next step in determining if sleep plays a role.
I think those are good points for sure. I think that a lot of times people, especially women, if you're listening to this, like we maybe just negate those things or we just, keep going, keep going. We don't really listen to ourselves. And so if you, I think a good point, and correct me if I'm wrong, like if you're somebody who wakes up and you have, like, from the second you wake up, you're just having a hard time getting out of bed, you're tired, you're cranky. I mean, that's not normal if you're getting good sleep typically. Now, if you only slept 4 hours, that's one thing. But if you're somebody who's getting a proper amount of sleep ish and you wake up and you just don't feel really rested or well, then I tell people all the time, like, there's probably an issue with the architect of your sleep or how you're sleeping, or like, I need you to go talk to a sleep doctor. I need you to have a sleep study because I don't know, I'm not there watching you. I do have a question for you though. What are your thoughts on like Aura rings and these devices that track people's sleep? Do you think they are helpful and beneficial?
I do, and I'm not a person who likes to sugarcoat things, so I'll give you the straight answer, which is that we are only really at the beginning of leveraging consumer health trackers to help us uncover features about our sleep. So I have two rings that I'm wearing right now, and I test these things all the time to figure out, how well are they performing. So as a general rule, sleep trackers like Aura, Fitbit, Whoop, I'm trialing the Ultra Human ring right now.
Mm-hmm.
All of these trackers are pretty good actually at determining when you fall asleep and when you wake up. So kind of the bookends of your night. Now, they report sleep staging, for example, but they're not that accurate right now. Maybe about 70%, 80% accurate at best. And the closer you are to the population of people that the devices were sort of researched on, the more accurate they're going to be. So if you deviate from that health-wise, age-wise, weight-wise, or sex-wise, then they are less accurate. Now, I want to circle back to something that you said, which I think is really important, and that is advocating for women's sleep. Women have more non-specific sleep-wake symptoms, and those can get mischaracterized as depression, anxiety, ADHD, bipolar disorder, or just periods of high stress. And I see this routinely because women just present differently. And historically, all the research and clinical experience has focused on men's sleep. So this is kind of the template on which we look at sleep as a whole. But women are different, and it's a little bit similar to how women have different symptoms of a heart attack. You know, it may be more indigestion or back pain instead of the crushing pain radiating down the arm. So I really advocate for women being one, but also caring for my patients who have very different presentations of sleep disorders compared to men.
So, this non-specific sleep-wake symptom, is that like, I hear women say all the time, I wake up at 3 a.m. and I can't go back to sleep and I don't know why I woke up. Is that a non-specific sleep-wake symptom, or what does that mean?
It could be. So there's an emotional and intellectual burden that women carry as well. And this is part of the way that we're socialized. We're caregivers for the generation above and caregivers for the generation below. And I think women's brains become quite busy at the beginning of the night or in the middle of the night. And that's a direct competitor with sleep. Another example of a nonspecific symptom is the whole concept of sleepiness during the day. It's more typical for me to talk to a man who says, I can't stay awake in meetings, or I can't stay awake when I'm watching TV at night. Women don't usually say that. They will instead report feeling just tired or exhausted, or they don't have enough energy, but they're not dozing off typically. In fact, it's rare that I'll have a woman say, like, I could nap at the drop of a hat. It's more that tired symptom, and that's nonspecific. But if you scratch the surface or do a sleep test, oftentimes I find something that would have otherwise gone unnoticed.
That's true. When I think about it, like, I can feel tired in my body, but it's not like I'm ever going to take a nap. Whereas my husband can sit on and watch TV and just like take a nap. And the same thing that you said, like, our brains are very busy. I tell him all the time, like, he lays down and we can be talking and he's like out,
Yep.
and I'm like, how did you do that? Like, it's just like they can like disconnect and just like leave the world. Whereas like I'm sitting there thinking about all the things, so that's interesting that you put it like that. So so then the symptoms of women's sleep and sleep problems in women are definitely different than women and men. Are those the only ways that you feel that they're different? Are there other ways, just by the things you were saying, like how we describe the symptom? Do we have other issues in how we sleep differently than men? Is any of it hormonally related?
Oh, definitely. So you're talking about reproductive hormones. There's changes in sleep architecture among women who are menstruating, uh, girls going through puberty, pregnancy, perimenopause, and menopause. All of these hormonal shifts have a sleep component that goes with it, and it might be good or bad. For example, women going through perimenopause and menopause typically notice a decline in their sleep quality that's not only related to hot flashes or vasomotor symptoms. So there is a reproductive hormonal component, but I also think that even though we can measure lots of things about sleep, it's still a very young field. And we're not measuring something when it comes to women's sleep. Here's an example. When big populations of men are compared to big populations of women, What's found about women's sleep is that we sleep a little bit longer, that we have a little bit more slow wave deep sleep. And yet, women consistently report less sleep quality than men. So we're limited a little bit by what we can actually measure when it comes to sleep. And for women, it seems that there's something missing. There's a blind spot that would more directly correlate with a woman's experience of their sleep.
I wonder if some of that, and this is just me as an endocrinologist, is related to testosterone.
Mm.
Because I will tell you that, and what I see in practice, men with lower testosterone have a lot of the same sleep symptoms as women. Like, I wake up at 3 a.m., they're just tired. It's interesting. And as soon as you fix their testosterone, I feel like their sleep gets a lot better. And then women, lose testosterone just like men, especially in their 40s. And I've replace testosterone in women sometimes when we need to. And I will tell you that I have a questionnaire that they fill out. And one of the fastest things that I see improve on that questionnaire, which is interesting, is sleep when you give a woman testosterone. So I wonder if some of it has to do with that, right? And that's why they just men just pass out and go in this lovely land and are just happy fine because they have way more testosterone than us. So, and then obviously when you lose estrogen as a woman, and progesterone is going to affect your sleep, but I wonder if that's a lot of it as well. So I want to go back to the Aura Ring because you said something, and I know I have this question. You said that the closer you are to the population that they made it for, like, what was that population? Is this like a 30-year-old male? Like, what is the population that the Aura Ring is the most specific in?
Yeah, Aura has gotten much better, I have to say. A couple years, I remember it was the summertime. I had been using Aura routinely, and I noticed there was a change to their algorithm. And all of a sudden, it was much more in line with my experience of sleep, but also I routinely test the Aura against home sleep apnea tests or level 2 devices and different other pieces of technology that would be considered medical grade. So, yes, historically, all sleep has been on like young men subjects, but things are improving. So this is a bit of a moving target. And there are different sort of success rates for consumer technologies. For example, and not to throw shade to Garmin, but historically, Garmin is one of the worst trackers for sleep and accurate sleep metrics. Fitbit tends to be good, Aura tends to be good. So, I think we're getting better. Things are moving, the algorithms are expanding. And if you think about all of this collective data we're getting from people who are using the devices, you would expect things to improve. So I think the wild card here then becomes like medical conditions and some environmental factors that might affect sleep. And as you know, the human body and the human experience with the external world is a very complex situation. So from one night to the next, you can have remarkable variation in your own sleep. Even a sleep medicine expert doesn't get perfect sleep every night, even though I know all of the things to do. It's like we're getting all this information, but it's on a backdrop of variability anyway. What I like about the consumer devices, though, is it brings sleep to the forefront of our conversations and helps us to connect. What am I doing that improves my sleep? Or what am I doing that makes it worse? So it's a behavior modification tool. And for that reason, I think it's well worth it to track one's sleep.
Yeah, to your point, because I have an Aura as well, an Aura Ring, and when I started using that app, especially when your sleep's bad, it will prompt you like, what was different last night? Did you have alcohol? And I thought it was just doing that so that I would recognize the things that were making my sleep worse, which I have changed a lot of things. But to your point, they're probably doing that to track things too, and to figure out variations and for, the benefit of what they're trying to learn too, which was pretty fascinating. And so then they're updating this information. How do they know whether you're in REM sleep or deep sleep, or like, how are they just assuming based on like how you're moving, your breathing, your heart rate? Like, how do they know that?
Yeah, REM sleep is kind of my white whale if I'm Captain Ahab. And part of the reason is, we all need REM sleep. We all get REM sleep. We could all stand to have more of it. But it's one of the more vulnerable sleep stages, especially in terms of breathing. And a feature of REM sleep is you get some temperature variability. So that's one of the correlates. You have some heart rate variability that's more consistent with being awake. And there's an algorithm that kind of takes a bunch of metrics and then predicts whether you're in REM sleep or not. We know that for humans, in the beginning of the night, you're going to have very short, brief periods of REM, and those will increase as the night goes on. So there's a probability factor there as well. But REM sleep can be tricky, and it's one of the least accurate sleep stages when it comes to consumer health devices. And if you look at kind of the opposite of REM sleep, it's slow wave deep sleep, where your heart rate is very regular, tends to be a little bit slower, and your breathing is very regular as well, which produces more regular blood oxygen levels. So that's another algorithm where it's spitting out like this prediction that you're in slow wave deep sleep.
Okay, that makes sense. So, what can you explain to people in general? You said something about HRV, I think, changes in HRV. What is, like, in general, HRV? What is it? What number do we want? And then what affects it when we're sleeping? Like, is it just part of sleep that changes HRV? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, and with your aura, you've probably seen that metric reported.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just say that the research on HRV is a little bit in its infancy right now. So we don't have good normative values or even a lot of perspective on what you can expect based on your age or your other components of health. But what is known is that it's better in general to have a bigger heart rate variability. That's what HRV stands for. A bigger heart rate variability means, in general, a slower heart rate with more space from one beat to the next. And that indicates a higher level of parasympathetic functioning. So that's that rest and digest mode that we all want to spend most of our time in, but we have competing factors like stress, alcohol, sedentary lifestyle, dehydration, poor diet. All of these things can conspire to put us more in a sympathetic nervous system state, which is the opposite of parasympathetic state. Caffeine is another thing that will reduce your heart rate variability, and it's something that I counsel people on regularly as they're kind of self-medicating with caffeine to compensate for sleep issues. But I think the heart rate variability, just looking into the future, will be have more weight as a health metric and really inform how well we're doing with things like stress management and heart health.
Yeah, it's something that I definitely look at on my Aura ring, and it will kind of tell you, your readiness score and things like that. I do think that sometimes I'm like, I don't know that that's accurate. Maybe I don't know where that's coming from, but I mean, I don't know. Sometimes maybe you're not really super in tune with your body either. So I do think that the rings are good. I think that I've changed a lot of things. One thing in particular, just to be honest with you, is alcohol. Like,
Mhm.
I was never a huge drinker, but I would have a glass of wine or, whatever. And every single time I had alcohol, it changed my HRV, it changed my REM sleep, it changed all sorts of stuff. So I told my husband, last month, I was like, I'm not drinking anymore. Like, I'm just not going to drink this year. And it hasn't done weird things to my HRV. So I do think that being able to see that is pretty interesting, because it's not like I woke up, with a headache or felt bad, but sometimes I would wake up and be like, oh, I just don't feel like I got like the best sleep. And when you can actually see that, to your point, caffeine, sometimes I'll have tea later. I don't do that anymore. So I do think it's beneficial for people to see that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the alcohol issue is One of the biggest myths I dispel as a sleep medicine physician, this concept that, oh, alcohol helps me sleep. The
Mhm,
nightcap is something that
mhm,
people often use as a way to get to sleep faster, but that's literally where the benefit ends. Every drink that you have has more and more negative effects on your sleep and causes some dehydration during the night, which makes your heartbeat faster and reduces your HRV.
mhm. For sure. Makes you hot, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So, why do you think, can you, for the women that are listening to this, why do they wake up at 3 a.m.? I know you said something about their brain's really busy in the middle of the night, but is there like some loss in hormone that causes this 3 a.m. awakening? Is it something that they're doing? You know, the women that are like, oh, I wake up every night at 3 a.m., some of them wake up anxious, some of them wake up because they have to go to the bathroom, but is there like something physiologically that's going on, something changing with their hormones? How do you explain that to people? And then talk to us about what people can do to like improve their sleep and make that not happen.
Mm. This would be what I would wave a magic wand at if I
Hmm.
had one. So you already listed some of the factors that prompt a middle of the night awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And the frustrating thing about it is it's not necessarily abnormal to wake up in the middle of the night. I want everybody to hear that. Waking up in the middle of the night doesn't have to be abnormal, especially as you enter your fifth decade, your sixth decade of life. You can't expect to sleep like you're in your 20s forever. However, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you think, here I am again. It's 3:30 in the morning. I'm never going to be able to get back to sleep. If I get back to sleep within the next 30 minutes, then I can get 2 more hours and I may be able to function well. Do you see this
Yep.
self-talk that goes on? And you
Yep.
add a layer of suffering to the situation that only drives sleep further away. There's this concept of a negativity bias that becomes really prominent in the middle of the night. And it's like reverting to a toddler form. Your brain is basically functioning like a toddler brain, catastrophizing, overestimating, worrying. And it's a period where we may really make it hard on ourselves if we start thinking about the future or the past, and that prolongs the time that we're awake. Women, I think, have a tendency to have that internal chatter, that self-talk that has a negative vibe, and that just prolongs the awakening. Plus, if you've already satisfied some of your sleep need by sleeping the few hours before, it's harder to get back to sleep. So, what can you do about it? Well, first of all, there are several techniques, and so you'll need to do some self-experimentation to see what works best for you. But if you tend to wake up and catastrophize or worry, it helps a lot to get out of bed or even just turn on a low light and stay in bed and write those things down. It does a couple of things for your brain. One is the writing slows your brain down and it makes your brain focus on getting the words onto paper. The other thing that it does is it helps you feel seen, soothed, and safe. And those sorts of emotions are consistent with sleep. So you may have a chance of getting back to sleep if you can calm your physiology. For extra credit, sometimes for people, I'll recommend that they have a highlighter and actually highlight things that they can do something about, because a lot of the stuff your brain comes up with, you have no control over. So
Mhm.
making the distinction can be really helpful, because if you can't do anything about it, there is no point in let it bouncing around in your head. Sometimes getting up out of bed can be helpful to do a reset, stretching, deep breathing, and that type of thing. But if it's happening routinely, you mentioned cell phones before. So I want to
Mhm.
say, if your brain is coming up and being busy in the middle of the night, it may be an indicator that you don't have enough white space to let your mind relax during the day. Now, I'm going to ask you something. You tell me if you've ever had this experience. Have you ever been like taking a shower and you're kind of going through your shower routine. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, that's a really great idea. Or you solve a problem that your mind's been working on. Has that ever happened to you?
Almost every day. I have, yes, because I know this. So I have a way that I try to make this happen in the morning because I know I'm creative because I do this brain dumping. But yes, I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's happening is that your default mode network
Mm-hmm.
is being active. And it's like when your brain gets a chance to like move the puzzle pieces around and find
Mm-hmm.
a piece that fits. If you're always connected to your device or you're trying to make it through a to-do list with 33 items on it, you don't have that opportunity for your default mode network to play during the day. You don't have that white space. So it's going to come up at night and you'll have a busy brain that you have trouble turning off to go to sleep.
I like that. Default mode network. Yeah. So, how long will it take someone to see improvements in their sleep when they start working on their sleep quality? Like, let's say somebody does all the things they're supposed to do, right? Like, I'm going to go to bed at the right time. I'm not going to be on my cell phone. I'm going to make sure I have white noise. I'm not going to have caffeine. I'm not going to have alcohol. How long? I'm assuming this isn't just like an instant thing. So, how long do you typically tell someone, hey, this, you're going to have to do this before they start noticing differences in their sleep?
The first thing I want to say is it's worth it. It's worth it. And it's going to take you longer than you want it to. Usually it's going to take at least a week, but more than likely 2 to 4 weeks before you're really like, okay, now I'm hitting my stride. It takes a little while for you to establish or reestablish trust in your sleep. It's kind of like you're in a relationship, right? So you have to show up consistently. You have to do all of the unsexy things that it takes to sleep well so your brain can trust that it has that time reserved to sleep.
Yeah. So you mentioned your brain's kind of like a toddler brain overnight. I like that, toddler brain. Can you explain to people what happens when you sleep in your brain? Because I think there's a lot of misconception as to what's happening. Like, are we forming memories? Are we not? Are we cleaning our brain? Is our brain just mush? Like, what is actually happening? Because I think it's important for people to understand. A lot of people say, well, sleep's not really that important. I can sleep when I'm dead, yada, yada, yada. There's actually a
Mhm.
lot of really important things that happen when you sleep, especially from a hormonal standpoint that I'm aware of. But can you explain to people why it's important for them to get a set amount of sleep, how long you think that adults should sleep, and then, what's going on in their brain when they're sleeping?
Yeah, those sentiments like I'll sleep when I'm dead, or
Mm-hmm.
there's some sort of weakness about sleeping. That's a very clunky opinion, and it's really been disproven by science. Um, Adults need between 7 and 8 hours of sleep to not only be healthy from one day to the next, but also to preserve their long-term mental, cognitive, cardiovascular, and metabolic health. That's well known. When you start getting less than 6 hours of sleep, you're really damaging your health. In fact, a study was done, since we talked about young men earlier, I'll tell you, there was a study done looking at a group of young men, college age, totally healthy. What happens if you sleep deprive them for 4 hours a night, 6 nights in a row? Well, what happened was they became pre-diabetic. So there's something really important about sleep, and all of the things that you mentioned are things that happen. The brain washes itself, cleanses the metabolites from all of the exposures and thinking that we do during the day. It moves some short-term memories to long-term. It decides which pieces of information have importance and how much importance to assign those things. We lay down procedural memory. It's an emotional regulation tool. And one of the functions of dreaming is basically to use this virtual reality function that our brain is capable of to process experiences during the day, including stressors. All of these things are so critically important to our mental and cognitive health. It kind of resets us and makes us new for the next day. So we need that sleep in order to function our best. The part of your brain that's most vulnerable to sleep loss is your frontal lobes, the parts that make decisions, the parts that are, kind of the intellectual part of you. And when that frontal lobe gets sleepy, it becomes leaky. So then the middle part of the brain, the emotional center, starts to act up. And that's the toddler part, the part that is going to be emotionally dysregulated. So sleep is really for the newest parts of our brain. The emotional regulation happens too, but it's so important that it takes up a third of our 24-hour day. So I think honoring that is really important.
So when you aren't sleeping, what I just heard you say too is then if you aren't sleeping enough, your frontal lobe becomes leaky. So then your midbrain is going to start acting up. So you're going to have emotional issues and behavior issues. So if you've already are having issues with anxiety and depression, and then we're not sleeping on top of that, it just makes it worse. Not to mention when we're not sleeping well, we're not stimulating a lot of growth hormone, and growth hormone is actually needed to make thyroid hormone and to make estrogen and testosterone and progesterone and all the things that we need to make us feel better and function during the day. And so that's why it's just this big, negative feedback. Unfortunately, once you start sleeping, it's like this spiral. So it is really, really important for people to get a handle on it, right? And like you said, it's going to change when hormones change. And so just making sure that we have good coping mechanisms, good ways to understand how to sleep, and finding providers to help you, figure out if this is an issue and not just like woo-woo your symptoms, like you said to begin with, is really, really important.
Agree. I beat my drum about this all the time. And I think the term sleep hygiene is a little bit cringy to me because it's so overused. But I think, when you make a choice to reform your sleep, it's like you're casting a vote for your best self every single night. And over time, that adds up. It protects your longevity, it protects your mental and physical health. And really, it helps us be the people that we are striving to be, to maximize our potential.
Yeah, I like that.
I will just say one last piece, which is that sleep can affect your hunger hormones. This is very hot right now. And it's not just sort of the physiologic hunger, it's also the emotional hunger that is not addressed with medications like GLP-1 agonists or the oral medications. For people who are on any kind of weight loss journey, you have physiologic hunger, you have emotional hunger. Sleep gets to a root cause that can help you lose weight by addressing both physiological and emotional hunger.
I like that. Okay. So that's good to know. So if you're somebody listening and you've had a hard time losing weight and you maybe have even tried the GLP-1s and you're still having issues, it could be some emotional hunger from lack of sleep. And do you think that has anything to do with, again, when we're sleeping like we're supposed to and our brain is able to clean itself out, our lymphatic system and all that, and we're actually able to make hormones appropriately, that our leptin and our ghrelin and our insulin and our cortisol are actually regulated correctly? And so maybe that has something to do with it. What are your thoughts about that?
It definitely has something to do with it. And another component is that if you're getting healthy sleep while you're losing weight, it helps you preserve your muscle tissue, which is metabolically active. So it's sort of an accentuator to help with calorie burn because you're going to keep your muscle around. You're not going to get the wasting that can come with weight loss.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Okay. Anything else that we missed?
I think that about does it.
Okay. So I appreciate you coming and explaining this to everyone. Obviously, we'll make sure that all your stuff is linked so people know how to find you. Do you want to tell people, are you active on social media? Do you have a website? Are you on YouTube? Like, how can people find you if they want to learn more information?
I typically direct people to my website, supersleepmd.com. I help people with obstructive sleep apnea and insomnia get all the deep sleep they deserve. I also have a limited coaching practice. If people are interested in that, they can go to awellsmd.com and sign up for a consultation where we determine if it's a good fit.
There's 3 questions that I always ask my podcast guests. And so I'm going to ask you these questions. I think it'll be interesting for your answers. And don't overthink them, just very easy questions. But the first question is, what is one food that's most beneficial and why?
For me, I think avocado is what I'm going to go with. I love avocados. They make things taste yummy. They have the fat content that I like. They've got the color. I think you can do great things with texture. So that's top of mind for me.
Okay. Is there a food in particular that stands out to you that maybe helps with sleep?
There's these ideas like tart cherry or kiwi help with sleep. And the truth is, there's no one single food that's going to move the needle that much. So when I counsel people about eating to sleep well, I tell them eat low processed foods, get your fiber in, get your healthy fats in, and stop eating 3 hours before you go to sleep. So those are kind of the low hanging fruit, so to speak, when it comes to managing your food and sleep together.
Okay. What is one thing that anyone can do that will improve their sleep? Let's say I normally ask health, but what is one thing anyone can do that will improve their sleep that's completely free?
My mind goes to exercise or light exposure. Both of these things improve sleep. So bright light exposure when you first wake up in the morning sets a little timer in your brain such that 16 hours later, you're more likely to be sleepy and fall asleep well. Exercise, kind of the same effect, right? You're really kind of getting your heart rate up, you're getting your body temperature up. And what that does is it pulls back the pendulum for wakefulness such that it releases and swings for the other direction for sleep. So light and exercise are 2 things you can totally manage. It can totally be free to improve your sleep quality.
Love both of those. And then the last question is, what is one thing you wish you would have known about your health or health in general 20 years ago that you would have done differently?
I wish I would have known what it took to get over my own insomnia. That was a hard thing for me, and it's part of the reason I'm a sleep doctor now. I have been through a couple things in my life that really knocked me back, and I'm prone to insomnia. Insomnia was a huge problem for me, and I had to dig deep to overcome it. So I like to say I'm not just book smart about sleep, I'm street smart too. Um, and I think when I was in it, I couldn't see my way out. Now I know what it takes, and I think it makes me a better doctor as a result.
For sure. I completely agree with that. Most of us that are really passionate and compassionate about what we do it's because we're helping somebody that we once were, right? So that makes sense. And to all the providers listening to this too, and I'm sitting here thinking this, most providers, if they've gone to medical school, have suffered with some sort of sleep deprivation, sleep insomnia, like especially if you went when there were no work hour rules, right? Like you definitely stayed up and did shift work and just did really bad things to your body. So, if don't do that. Like if you have the option, don't do that. And that's one of the things I wish I would have known 20 years ago about my health, is how important sleep was, because I kind of was in that generation of like, oh, well, you can sleep when you're dead. It doesn't matter. Go, 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 go. Even if you do feel like physically tired. And I just wish that that's something I would have really latched onto in my 20s. And instead of, worrying about what everyone was doing at 10 o'clock at night or 11 or 12 and all that, I wish I would have just went to bed like I do now. Because I have zero FOMO now. I don't care. If it's past 9 o'clock, you will find me in bed. Period.
I agree. That's a tough lesson to learn, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, especially for someone who has a high internal drive. And I talk to physicians who, to this day have sleep problems, those who take call, those who have, ICU, OB-GYN, ED careers. Sleep directly competes with your decision making and your safety on the job, your safety off the job as well. So yeah, I applaud that. I think that it's a tough lesson to learn, and sometimes we don't learn it until we're in the middle of our career. But just for your well-being, it's so important.
I would agree. Well, thank you, Dr. Wells, for joining me and helping educate all of our guests. I appreciate you. And then if you're listening to this and you listen to this podcast and you think this would be beneficial, so if you know anyone who's struggling with sleep, which would be most women in their 40s or 50s, or, anyone in general who this would help benefit, then please make sure that you share this episode with them. Make sure you leave us a review and like or follow our show. We're on every Sunday. And then make sure you tune in next week for another episode. Thank you. I hope that you found this episode with Dr. Audrey Wells as informative as I did. I hope now that you understand and have a little bit more basic knowledge about why sleep is so powerful, why you need 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night, and all the great benefits that sleep can give you, including that control of emotional and physiological hunger. So if you thought this episode was good, was beneficial, someone who struggles with sleep issues, and you should, because 1 in 3 Americans do, please make sure that you share this episode with them. That's why we do this, to educate. So make sure that you share this episode with them. Make sure that, you're listening to it. Make sure that you try to take away some of these key things that we discussed to make your sleep hygiene better. If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure that you like it. Leave us a review so we know we're doing a good job. Make sure that you're following us so that every week when the podcast comes out, you're getting notifications so you don't miss any of my great guests. I have so many guests coming that I'm super excited about. And if you are somebody who's struggling with sleep or any of the things that we discuss on this podcast, especially hormone-based, remember that Modern Endocrine now sees people in 21 states. We are still looking to expand, but we have active licenses in 21 states. Those states are listed on our website, which you can find in the show notes. We do virtual visits if you are in any of those 21 states. If you are not and you would like to become a patient, you can come to Oklahoma City to our clinic for your first visit. We would be happy to see you, and then we can see you virtually after that. We would love the privilege to help you in your medical journey. And also just make sure that you tune in next week, because again, I've got a lot of great episodes coming for you, and they're all things that you guys have asked about. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great week. The information presented, including any materials discussed, referenced, or linked within this podcast, are for general educational purposes only, not the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed from you listening to this podcast or utilizing any of the information provided. I am a doctor, but I am not talking to you as your doctor. The information provided is not intended to diagnose or treat health problems, or take the place of the professional medical care provided by your doctor. If you are experiencing any health problems, including problems you believe have been touched upon in any respect within this podcast, you should consult your doctor about the problems without delay. You may ask your doctor whether he or she believes the information I have provided would be helpful to you, but you should still consult your doctor immediately and follow his or her medical advice as your treating physician. I'm just here to provide you basic knowledge about the issues we discuss so you are more aware of them and can better discuss them with your doctor. That's why we call it Back to the Basics. Join me on the next episode as we continue our journey.